Hello guys, Fish767 here. So today we're going to be taking a look at some colorless infinite combos that can go in any commander deck, whatever commander deck you want. Now they pair best with a black commander deck because black just has a lot of the same synergies that these cards do, but they can go in any commander deck. So I'm just going to start us off with an easy one that's simple to understand, and then you can get an idea on what we're doing. And you'll see that for most of these combos, we're going to need some sort of sacrifice outlet. So that can be Ashnod's Altar, Altar of Dementia, or Phyrexian Altar, which I don't have Phyrexian Altar to show you, but you'd basically be using those. So this is our first this is our first combo. It is pretty easy to understand. Let me zoom in a smidge. Okay, so what we're going to do with this combo is we have Dro Scorpion, Mer Turbine, Ashnod's Altar. You need them all out on the field. You tap Mer Turbine to make a 1/1 Mer, and then you're going to use that Mer and sacrifice it to the Ashnod's Altar to get 2 colorless mana, which will trigger our Dro Scorpion. And Dro Scorpion says whenever it or another artifact creature is put to a graveyard from play, you may untap target artifact. So we're going to untap our Mer Turbine. Now, using this, we can make infinite mana, and we'll also have infinite creatures entering the battlefield and leaving the battlefield, and they're also artifacts, so we can trigger quite a few different things with this. But the main idea here is to get infinite mana, and then we can cast whatever spells we want. Now, it's colorless mana, but if you were to use something like Phyrexian Altar, that would be colored mana, and any color that you'd like. Now, you can also switch out the Ashnod's Altar to Altar of Dementia, and Altar of Dementia will let you mill everybody to death, basically, unless they have an Eldrazi Titan or Gaia's Blessing in their deck, in which case, that's not going to work. But that's a very basic combo, and it sort of shows what we are trying to do with most of our combos here, and a lot of our other combos will just build on that. So now, instead of the Mer Turbine, we're going to switch it in for Pentivus. Pentivus says that it enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay 1 to remove a +1/+1 counter to put a 1/1 colorless artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield, and then pay 1 to sacrifice a Pentavite and put a +1/+1 counter on Pentivus. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pay 1, so you're going to have 1 floating or be able to sacrifice another creature. But we're going to pay 1, and, oh yeah, my bad. We also need a mana rock that taps for 2 mana or less. So I've just got a couple here. There's Sisay's Ring, Soul Ring, Urgolem's Eye, Hedron Archive, Dreamstone Hedron, Firemind Vessel, Worn Power Stone, Palladium Mer, and Thran Dynamo. If it taps for 3 mana or more, it will give you infinite mana in the process. Otherwise, it won't. But that's okay. So we're just going to say that we're using Sisay's Ring here since that just came out. So you tap Sisay's Ring for 2 mana, then you're going to pay 1 to make a 1/1 Pentavite, and then you're going to pay 1 to sacrifice the Pentavite, which is going to cause it to die, and that's going to trigger a Dro Scorpion to untap the Sisay's Ring. And basically you can do this an infinite number of times to get infinite triggers. Now, if you wanted to, you could add in the Ashnod's Altar instead of the Sisay's Ring, but that changes the way that things are going to work a little bit, because now we're not putting the +1/+1 counters back on the Pentivus. So, what we have to do is we have to somehow reset the counters on the Pentivus, which isn't a big issue, because we're just going to run a Cauldron of Souls. Now, Cauldron of Souls says that we can tap it and choose any number of target creatures, and each of them gain persist until the end of turn, which means that when it dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, you return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Now, what we'll do is we'll run out the Pentivus of +1/+1 counters, and once it's at 0, we're going to have to sacrifice the Pentivus. So we're going to tap the Cauldron of Souls to give the Pentivus persist. Then we're going to sacrifice the Pentivus for 2 mana. It's going to die, trigger Dro Scorpion, untap Cauldron of Souls, and then because it persists, it's going to come back. So then it'll just come back with 4 counters on it, and then we can continue going. Now this will generate infinite mana because the Pentivus death mana will end up being used for whatever you want, really. And that's one way to set up this combo. Now that we're on the Cauldron of Souls combo, I want to bring up Triskelion. So Triskellion's combo is going to be a little bit weird, but it works pretty much the same way that Pentivus did. So Triskelion says that it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and then you can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. So basically, we're going to remove all the +1/+1 counters from it to kill or to hit somebody in the face for 3 damage. Then we're going to tap Cauldron of Souls, give it persist, sacrifice it for 2 mana, trigger the Dro Scorpion to untap the Cauldron of Souls, and then it comes back with persist. It doesn't necessarily happen in that order. I think it comes back before the Cauldron of Souls untaps. But anyway, and then it'll come back with 2 +1 +1 counters on it, so we'll remove those to deal 2 damage, and this also generates infinite mana. Now, as you'll notice, the Drill Scorpion is pretty key in all these combos. Alternatively, you can use Clock of Omens, which is to tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to untap target artifact. But if you're going to use Clock of Omens in the Triskelion or the Pentavis combo, which is the only ones that it works in, it does not work in the Mer Turbine combo, and it also won't work if you're using Ring, because you're not having creatures leaving or entering the play. So this only works if you're having creatures leaving or entering the play. And you have to use Genesis Chamber, which I don't have with me because I lost it and I don't know where it went and I haven't been able to find it. So anyway, Genesis Chamber is a 2-drop artifact. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless Mer, and it's non-token creature. And and that's as long as Genesis Chamber is untapped. And so basically the Genesis Chamber will trigger every time that we sacrifice one of these guys, and then we can tap the creature that came in and the Mer to untap the Cauldron of Souls, and that's how we'll have to run it. And it'll still work the exact same way as before. The only difference is now you're tapping artifacts, and whereas before you weren't. Now, there's another way to do it, and that's with Workhorse, and it works pretty much the same way as with Triskelion and Pentavis. And it says it comes into play with 4 +1 +1 counters on it. Then you remove a +1 +1 counter from it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can play this ability as a mana source. So it's not really super helpful. It just generates infinite mana, but it does trigger infinite death triggers, which you should be able to win with using some other card. So there's 3 different ways to set up this combo. Another thing that I have just realized, they all generate infinite mana, so if you have a Mortar Pod, you can use Mortar Pod and equip it to the creatures because you'll have infinite mana, and then sacrifice them to deal damage. So you'll just have to break the combo once you have infinite mana, and then you're going to replace the Ashnod's Altar with Mortar Pod. And it should work just about the same way. The only one that it won't work with maybe is Pentavis, but you have infinite mana, so it shouldn't be a big deal. You can also use something like Skull Clamp to draw your deck out and then play it because you have infinite mana, and this is probably going to be a colorless deck. So those are the general combos that I have set up at the current moment. There are other ways to set up combos like this, and you can do some pretty amazing ones. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, instead of the Genesis Chamber, you can use Battered Golem. It does the exact same thing. Well, it does functionally the same thing for us. It doesn't untap during your untap step, and whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Battered Golem. And when the Cauldron of Souls makes these guys come back, we can untap the Battered Golem. Also, we can sacrifice the Battered Golem by giving it the Persist from the Cauldron of Souls, because this is any number of creatures. And so by doing that, we can generate extra mana, or in the case of Altar of Dementia, which I don't know how you're doing it with Altar of Dementia, except for with Workhorse or Triskelion, because it doesn't work with Pentavis. Actually, no, it does work with Pentavis. It's just slower. But anyway, you sacrifice a creature and they mill cards, and so it works with any of the altars. If you have Altar of the Brood down, you can mill while you're doing most of these as well. But that's just the general idea of how these work. There are other ways to set them up for sure, and there's a lot of really weird combos that you can do with colorless cards. I just wasn't able to find all the cards that I need to actually set them up and show you guys physically how to do them. But if you look, you can find a lot of silly combos with these. Now, like I said, if you're using black cards, you can do a lot more with it. So you can use Pitiless Plunderer, which says whenever a creature dies, make a colorless treasure, and then you can sacrifice the treasure for a mana of any color. And then that can replace the, not the Clock of Omens, but that could replace the Battered Golem or the Genesis Chamber. And it also gives you more artifacts to use. And then if you have Sifter of Skulls, that says whenever a creature dies, or a non-token creature dies, you make a Scion. And then the Scion you can sacrifice for a colorless mana, so it can also help you out with getting extra mana if you're doing the Pentavis thing. And I think that it doesn't quite work out perfectly with the Pentavis. If you have Ashnod's Altar out with the Sifter Skulls and the Pentavis, you can make that go infinite. You have to have 2 mana to start with to trigger the Pentavis. Or no, you only need 1 to start with to trigger the Pentavis. And then once you get the first Pentavite out, you just sack it for 2 mana, and then you'll start your little chain there and make infinite death triggers. And so this definitely pairs best with black. Like I said, you don't have to use black. If you use blue, blue has a lot of good artifact tutors. So does red. And so you could put this in a blue-red Joy-Red deck if you wanted, and then you'd be drawing cards every time that you played one of your combo pieces. And Joy-Red also wants to have all of these artifacts here that tap for 2 mana. So that would work out very nice. And there's just some other ways to set this up. Like Cauldron of Souls is really good in Mikaeus. You can use him in Mikaeus because it gives all of your creatures Undying. So if you have a persist Undying creature, it can't ever die, and so you can just sacrifice it an infinite number of times. This would also work fairly well in a Yawgmoth Thran Physician deck, because Yawgmoth likes to put -1/-1 counters on things, and we have stuff that has +1/+1 counters, so that's really good. And you'd have a lot of Undying in a Yawgmoth deck, because if you get 2 creatures with Undying out, it goes infinite. I think. Yeah, it goes infinite if you can get 2 creatures with Undying out with Yawgmoth, but then you'll lose a bunch of life. So anyway, this would be really good in a Yawgmoth deck. So those are just some ideas of what to put it in. But mainly I built this because I wanted to do something just colorless with it. I wanted to build like a colorless Berea deck, and so this is what I threw together to put into the colorless Berea deck. If you wanted to include the Eldrazi's that are devoid, you could put in the white one. I forgot its name, but it says pay colorless and 2, and then you can flicker something, and it comes back tapped. And you can do these combos, most of them at infinite speed. I'm pretty sure all of them at infinite speed once you have it set up. So that I meant not infinite speed, goodness, at instant speed. That's what I meant to say. So then you just like wait till an opponent's turn, and then you can tap down all their creatures, and then they can't do anything to attack you at least. And then if you wanted to go white, you could include Flicker Wisp, and then use this as just a way to set up the infinite mana for Flicker Wisp and Eldrazi Displacer. That's the name of the card. And then you flicker the Flicker Wisp, and then you get rid of all your opponent's things. And the Flicker Wisp, it doesn't flicker, it blinks, so they won't come back until the end of the next turn, or until the next end step, I mean. So then at the beginning of everybody's turn, at their upkeep, you can flicker all of your opponent's permanents. Or not flicker them, but you're going to blink them so that they won't come back until the end of the turn. And so they'd only be able to do things during their upkeep. And if you were to run the Teferi that says that they can't do things at instant speed, then you would be essentially locking them out of the game. And you can also do the same thing to your permanents if you want, just as a fun thing. So Blink works pretty well with this, as long as you use the Eldrazi Displacer as a way to convert your mana to flickers. I don't know if there's a way that this combos really well with blue. I know that you can use Prototype Portal and the Door Knocker. I don't remember what it is. It's a 2-drop artifact. It's a 2/1. No, it's a 1/4. 2-drop 1/4 artifact. It says when it enters the battlefield, you may untap target artifact or creature. And so you'll put it under Prototype Portal, which it's a 4-drop artifact that says when it enters the battlefield, you're going to exile an artifact from your hand under it, and then you can pay X, where X is the converted mana cost of the card that you exiled, to put a copy of it into play. And so you'll generate infinite mana using these combos, and then you're going to pay 2 and tap the Prototype Portal to make a copy of the artifact, which will then untap the Prototype Portal, and then you can do that an infinite number of times, but the artifact is blue. But that would give you infinite of those artifacts. It's basically a longer Kiki-Jiki combo. And they don't have haste. And if you have anything that says, like, when an artifact enters the battlefield, draw a card, that would be a good way to make this work. Or if you have something that says when an artifact ETBs, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, that would be a good way to make this work. In green, you'd want to abuse the creatures entering the battlefield, or do something with, like, Cryptolith Rite, letting them tap for mana. And then you could run 1,000-Year Elixir, which gives them haste. Well, basically haste. It's not actually haste, it's like pseudo-haste. And so then you can just tap them for a bunch of mana, and then you could use something like Reese to make a really big army, basically. I actually have Reese right here. Let me show you. So yeah, Reese says you can pay 4 and like green white to tap it, and then for each creature token you control, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. And so by using Cryptolith and Thousand Year Elixir, you can give those tokens haste so that they can tap for mana right away once they ETB. And then you'll basically just be going infinite with Reese as long as you can untap Reese. So that would require you to turn Reese into an artifact, which Liquid Metal Coating will let you do that. And then you'll just untap it with Draw Scorpion or something along those lines. Or you can use... I'm trying to think. If you use Village Bell Ringer and Eldrazi Displacer, you can flicker the Village Bell Ringer, which when it ETBs will untap all your permanents. Or not all your permanents, but all your creatures. And then the Eldrazi Displacer, you're going to be making the infinite mana from the other combos to basically make that work. So it works very well in Reese. As for red, you'd want to do something like Impact Tremors, basically. So you're going to be running like Impact Tremors and the enchantment that has Khans of Dragons. Whenever a creature leaves, deal damage. You'll be doing stuff like that. You'd probably want to use Norn the Wary as a commander because he already synergizes very well with what you're doing. And then I'd say Chaos is your friend, at least for red, because the longer that you can prolong the game, especially since you're playing a combo, the better it is, because red's not really the best color to be doing a combo in. So things like Chaos Warp and Warp World, and seeing if you can do them multiple times just onto your own things to potentially flip a combo piece, that's probably a good idea. And Norn himself can do a ton of damage. I've won games where I had nothing but lands and just let Norn like sit there, and basically all I had was Norn and Impact Tremors, and it does a good 20 points of damage. And then they started attacking me. They're like, he needs to die, and I'm like, well, now I have dragons, so what are you gonna do? But anyway, yeah, you can win games with Norn just by himself. Teshar would be another good one to play with this, because you can like get some of the other little creatures back with Teshar, and since these are historic spells, you can get other creatures back, like Cartographer's Hawk, Burnished Heart. You would be able to get back. You could get back Myr Retriever, and then you'd have ways to do other loops in the Teshar deck if you wanted to do it that way. I'm trying to think if there's another deck that this would be particularly good in. Maybe Glissa. I think it's Glissa. But she says whenever an opponent's creature dies, you can return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. And she has Death Touch and First Strike. And she has 2 black and a green to play. And I think that this might do decently well in that deck if you ran Myr Retriever with it. Or had like Executioner's Bauble, I think, which is a black artifact that says pay black, tap it, sack it, and then you can blow up an opponent's creature, and then Glissa will put it back into your hand right away. So then you could use this to make infinite mana just to do that and blow up all your opponent's creatures as many times as you want. But it's really up to you how you take it from here and turn it into something that you want to do yourself. Tidespot Tyrant is another cool way to like abuse this, because you can get infinite mana with the Tidespot Tyrant, and then using Aetherflux Reservoir, you'd be able to gain infinite life just by casting 2 permanents as many times as you wanted and bouncing them back to your hand each time. So that's a neat way to do it. And if you're going to do it that way, that also lets you use the 4-drop legendary artifact that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, untap it. What is that? Is that Thrax? I don't think it's Thrax. I forgot its name, but basically you'd be able to use that to do some of these combos that you weren't previously able to do. Using Winter Orb and like Emery to just slow things down would be a nice way to ensure that you hit these combos. Now, it's definitely not nice for your playgroup, but if you use Emery and the Winter Orb, you can ensure that you have time to set your combos up, and then since the combos give you infinite mana, you don't care about the Winter Orb after that point. And then Emery makes sure that if the Winter Orb gets destroyed, you can just bring it back for 2 mana. And also, Emery is just like really good with artifacts and stuff. So there's that, and if you wanted to, you could swap out some of these pieces for other ones, actually using liquiminal coating as your output for the combo. Once you have infinite mana, you can just use liquiminal coating and then untap and tap it to turn all your opponent's permanents into artifacts. And then you could play something like a March of the Machines, and then all of the artifacts would become creatures with power and toughness equal to the converted mana cost, which means that their lands would die. And then at the end of the turn, they would no longer be artifacts, and so then they'd just be stuck with whatever they have without their lands. What is it? Sidri? It's not Sidri. It might be Sidri. I don't remember. But she is 1 white, blue, and black to play, 2/2, and then she says pay blue, target creature becomes an artifact, or target non-artifact creature becomes an artifact with power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost, and then she says pay black and white, and then target artifact creature gains lifelink and death touch until the end of the turn. And then you could use that with the liquiminal coating to kill off their lands, basically, and she could be your commander. It's Sidri, Galvanic Genius, I think. So she would be really fun to play this with. And as for other things, something like X-Cost cards, it might be nice to play with because you generate infinite mana. So the X-Cost cards could be interesting. And then maybe a commander that has like Pay X on it. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that could be nice. If you were to toss this into a... no, it's not. What am I thinking? It's a black commander. It's 5 and black. It has Delve. It's Tasigur Golden Thing. If you were to toss this into Tasigur and have some way to generate blue and green, you could do Tasigur's ability an infinite number of times, which would basically draw you your entire deck except for lands, and then you could cast whatever you want, so that could be like a J-Star Labman and then win off of that. That's a little bit more complicated than just like using Thrasios and then paying 4 and doing that an infinite number of times, which is much easier. So there's a lot of ways to make this deck actually win and turn infinite mana into a win, especially if you have infinite colored mana, which I showed you mostly how to get infinite colorless mana, but if you used Phyrexian Altar, you could get infinite colored mana, as long as you don't have to worry about like Pentavis, which requires 2 mana specifically. As long as you don't have to worry about that, then you'd be good to basically use Phyrexian Altar and generate a ton of colored mana, and then you can use something like what's the commander? It's the 5-color commander that just came out that has like it's white, and then it has all of the other colors. Like you pay 1 red and give something haste, give all of the creatures haste, and then you can pay like 5 and reanimate a creature, and then you can pay 2 and somebody gains life, and then you can draw cards and deal damage and stuff like that, or buff him. I can't remember his name, but he's like sitting on a throne. If you use that guy, you could do a lot of damage with this deck. And then things like Prismatic Lens can filter the mana, and you'd be pretty okay with that, or maybe it's Prismatic Array, or Gemstone Array, I think is what I'm thinking of. And you can basically filter your mana to whatever colors you need. And if you were to use something like Empowered Auto Generator, that thing gets really dumb the more times that you do this deck. It taps to put a charge counter on it, and then you gain mana equal to the number of charge counters on it. And it's like a 4-drop mana rock. So you have to use it twice in order for it to be able to actually combo. But then after that, it's making an additional mana every time that you tap it. So that would be 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you can use that mana, it's mana of any color, to basically do whatever you need. So that one would be really fun to play. And then that opens up room to charge counters where you could play like Glacial Chasm and I forget the name of the other card, but basically it taps to remove a counter to put a charge counter onto an artifact. And then you can do a bunch of fun stuff with like Sun Droplet and things. So that's a really fun way to actually take the deck. And then that would open up room to like a blue-green counter deck with like Darksteel Reactor and stuff, and that would be really fun to play actually. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I'll talk to y'all later. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you can think of any other colorless combos. I try to avoid the Grim Monolith and stuff, and Basalt Monolith, those combos, because those are pretty well known. So I tried to go for some more not yet seen combos. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.